Celine stood in front of the council, her heart racing. Council members, towering and cold, sat in their chairs, eyes fixed on her with judgment. The ceremony was meant to be a moment of pride, a time when women from her species were chosen. For their ability to bear children and continue the future of their people, she had been prepared for this moment her whole life. From a young age, she had been trained in the ways of her kind, taught how to be elegant, how to present herself, how to be perfect. Every detail mattered, for women like her were the backbone of their society. But today, as she stood before the council, everything felt wrong. The whispers among the crowd made her stomach churn. The rejection had already begun, even before the council had spoken. Selena's skin, soft shade of violet, shimmered under the harsh light of the council chamber. Her eyes, a deep shade of green, scanned the room, looking for any sign of warmth. But all she found were cold, emotionless faces. Her body, once her pride, felt like a betrayal now. One of the council members, a tall male with gray hair and sharp features, stood up. His voice echoed through the room. "Celine, we have reviewed your genetic records. While your beauty is undeniable, there are concerns regarding your physical condition." He paused, looking over his shoulder at the others for support. "You are ... incompatible with our breeding standards." The words hit Celine like a blow to the chest. Her vision blurred, and for a moment she couldn't hear anything but the pounding of her own heartbeat. She had been chosen for this moment her whole life. This was supposed to be her purpose. But instead, she was rejected. The council member continued, his voice distant and cold. "You will be sent back to your home. You are no longer considered for breeding. Your genetic line will not continue with our people." Tears threatened to spill from her eyes, but she fought them back. She had been taught that emotions were a weakness, that the duty to her people was all that mattered. But now, standing here in front of those who had once promised her greatness, she felt like nothing. She lowered her head, her long dark hair cascading over her shoulders like a veil, hiding the tears she could not hold back. The council moved on, their eyes already moving to the next candidate, as if she didn't even matter. Without a word, Celine turned and walked out of the chamber. The doors closed behind her with a soft thud, and she was left alone in the cold, sterile corridor. She didn't know where to go, what to do. All her life, her worth had been tied to the council's decision. Without their approval, she was nothing. As she walked through the halls, people passed by her without a second glance. They whispered among themselves, pointing at her, talking about her failure. She felt the weight of their stares, like 1,000 invisible hands pushing her down. Celine continued walking, her footsteps echoing in the silence. Her heart ached with each step. She had always known that her people were strict, that their expectations were high, but she had never imagined it would feel like this. She had been trained for this, and yet, now that it was happening, she felt lost. Broken. The pain of rejection was suffocating, and she couldn't breathe. Her mind was racing, her thoughts scattered like a storm. What was she supposed to do now? Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned quickly, wiping her eyes in a desperate attempt to hide her emotions. A human soldier stood there, dressed in the blue and gray uniform of Earth's peacekeepers. He wasn't from her species, but he was familiar to her. She'd seen him before in the halls, a part of the peacekeeping force sent to maintain order between her people and others. He was standing a few feet away, his posture relaxed but alert. His eyes were warm, curious, not judgmental like those. "Of her own kind? Are you okay?" the soldier asked softly, his voice kind but concerned. "I saw what happened back there." Celine didn't respond at first. She didn't want to speak, didn't want to explain. What could she say? How could she explain the shame she felt, the deep, aching sense of worthlessness? The soldier stepped closer, his expression softening. "I'm Ethan," he said. "I'm sorry you had to go through that." Ethan's voice was calm, sincere, and it had an unexpected effect on Celine. She had never heard such kindness before, certainly not from her own people. Her species valued strength and duty, not empathy. She looked at him, searching his face for any sign of mockery or pity, but there was none, only understanding. "Know what to do," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Ethan took a step closer, but not too close. He respected her space. You don't have to do anything right now. I'm just here to listen if you want to talk. You're not alone. Alone. Felt something shift inside her. It was a strange feeling, something she had never felt before. It wasn't pity or judgment. It was kindness, something she had never known she needed. Thank you, she said, her voice trembling. She had never spoken those words with such sincerity before. Ethan smiled, though it was a small, gentle smile. No need to thank me. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect. You deserve to be treated with respect. For the first time that day, Celine felt like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't broken. That someone, even a human, saw her as more than just a failed experiment. More than just an object to be judged. In that moment, Celine realized that she was worth more than the council's rejection. Maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to believe that again. After that day, Celine couldn't shake the feeling of Ethan's kindness. Every time she closed her eyes, she could hear his gentle voice, telling her that she wasn't alone, that someone cared. It was a strange thought, one she had never allowed herself to entertain before. She had been raised to believe that only her people's approval mattered, that their view of her was all she had. But Ethan had shown her something different. He treated her like a person, not an object. He respected her, not for what she could do or what she could produce, but for who she was. The next few days were filled with uncertainty. The rejection still hung heavily on her, and she felt like an outsider in her own world. But Ethan's words stayed with her. He had invited her to join him for walks in the city, showing her parts of the world she had never seen. His offer to help was sincere, and for the first time, she allowed herself to accept it. She met him by the edge of the city, near a large park filled with tall trees that reminded her of the forests from Earth, a place she had only heard of in stories. Ethan smiled as she approached, his eyes friendly but understanding. "Hey, Celine," he greeted her warmly. "I thought we could take a walk. Just get away from the noise for a bit." Celine nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. She wasn't sure if she was ready to step away from the weight of her responsibilities, but the idea of having a moment of peace felt good. She followed him into the park, the soft grass beneath her feet a welcome change from the cold stone floors of the city. As they walked, Ethan shared stories of Earth's home, his family, and his experiences. Celine listened with fascination, intrigued by the way he spoke about his life. Humans seemed to value things that didn't exist in her world: love, kindness, joy for simple things. It was hard for her to imagine a life like that, but she couldn't help but wish for it. "I know it's hard, Celine," Ethan said, breaking the silence between them. "You've been raised to believe in things that aren't easy to change, but you're not defined by what others think of you. You're more than that." Celine hesitated, "But I've been told my whole life that my worth is in my ability to breed, to contribute to my people's future. Without that, I'm nothing." Ethan stopped walking and turned to face her. "That's a lie. No one, not even your own people, has the right to tell you what you are worth. You have your own strength, your own mind. You're not just a tool for breeding. You're a person with a future." Celine looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in. She had never thought of herself as anything more than a means to an end. But now, Ethan was asking her to see herself differently, to see herself as an individual, not just a member of a species defined by its ability to reproduce. For the first time, Celine allowed herself to wonder what it would be like to live a life where she didn't have to prove herself to anyone. A life where her worth wasn't tied to an ancient tradition that had nothing to do with who she really was. Over the next few weeks, Celine began to change. With Ethan's encouragement, she started to explore more of the human world, taking in the beauty of the planet she had never been allowed to appreciate. She spent time learning about Earth's history, the way humans built relationships based on trust and respect. Not just survival, Ethan was always there, helping her adjust to this new way of thinking. He didn't push her, didn't demand anything of her. He simply offered support, letting her find her own path. Slowly, she began to realize that there was more to life than what she had been taught. She could be more than just a member of her species. She could be herself. One day, Ethan invited her to visit a human home. It was nothing like the sterile, clinical spaces Celine was used to. The home was warm, with soft lighting and comfortable furniture. There was laughter in the air, and the scent of food cooking in the kitchen made her stomach growl. "This is where I grew up," Ethan said, as he led her through the house. "It's not much, but it's home." Elena couldn't help but admire the simplicity of it all. People here valued their connections to one another, and it was clear in the way Ethan spoke about his family. They didn't need grand ceremonies or traditions to feel important. They had each other. Ethan's family welcomed her warmly, and for the first time, Celine felt truly accepted. They didn't care about her past or her genetics. They saw her as just another person, someone they could share a meal and a conversation with. As the evening went on, Celine felt a sense of peace she had never known. She realized that she had been so focused on meeting the expectations of her people that she had never given herself the chance to truly live. She had been trapped in a cycle of self-doubt and fear, but now with Ethan by her side, she felt a spark of hope for the future. That night, she lay in bed. Celine thought about everything she had learned. She had been given a second chance, a chance to live for herself, not for anyone else's approval. She didn't need to prove her worth to anyone. She was enough just as she was. For the first time in her life, Selena smiled, and it was a smile that came from within, a smile of hope, of freedom, and of a future she could shape on her own terms. The days after Celine's time with Ethan had been nothing short of a revelation. She felt like a different person, freer, more confident, and less burdened by the weight of her past. Every day, she discovered something new about herself, something that had been buried under the expectations of her people for so long. Ethan had become a steady presence in her life, always kind, always patient. His belief in her was something she had never known before. He never treated her like she was defined by her rejection, but rather as someone with endless potential. His support had become the anchor she needed to rebuild herself. But as her relationship with Ethan deepened, the tension between Celine and her own people grew stronger. Word spread of her association with the human soldier, and whispers began to circulate in the halls of her society. Her rejection had caused a ripple effect, one that was becoming harder to ignore. One afternoon, Celine found herself in the city center, lost in her thoughts, when she was approached by an old acquaintance. It was Zorath, one of the higher-ranking members of the council. He had been a mentor to her in her youth, someone she had once looked up to. Now, as he stood in front of her, his eyes cold and distant, Celine knew something had changed. "Celine," he said, his voice clipped and stern, "I need to speak with you." Celine felt her stomach drop. She knew this conversation would not be friendly. "What is it, Zorath?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "You've made a mistake," he said, his eyes narrowing. "A human soldier? Do you have any idea what you're doing? You're causing a disruption in the natural order of things?" Selena's heart skipped a beat. She had heard rumors of the council's growing displeasure with her behavior, but to hear it from Zorath, someone she had once trusted, was a shock. "I haven't done anything wrong," she replied, standing taller. "I've only been living my life as I see fit." Zorath's expression hardened. "Laws of our people. You were chosen to serve your species, to breed and strengthen our future. And now you've chosen to waste it, all for the company of a human. You're bringing shame upon us all." The harsh words stung, but Celine didn't let them show. Had learned not to let the opinions of others define her. "I'm not ashamed," she said firmly. "I'm finally seeing who I really am. I'm not defined by your laws or by anyone's expectations. Not anymore." Zorath shook his head in disappointment. "You'll regret this, Celine. There are those who will not let this go. You're putting yourself and your people in danger." Before Celine could respond, Zorath turned and walked away, his words hanging heavy in the air. She stood there for a moment, unsure of what to think. The warning was clear. Her actions had consequences. It's not just for her. Later that night, as Celine sat in her room, the weight of the conversation with Zora settled over her. She thought of Ethan, of how far they had come, and how much she had changed since meeting him. But now, the peace she had found seemed fragile, threatened by the very society that had once defined her, as she tried to push the thoughts away. A soft knock at the door interrupted her. Startled, she stood and opened it to find Ethan standing in the doorway, his face filled with concern. "Hey, everything okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. Celine hesitated for a moment before stepping aside to let him in. "I'm not sure," she replied. "Zoroth, he warned me. He said my actions are putting both me and my people in danger." Ethan's brow furrowed. "With concern? Danger? What do you mean?" Celine took a deep breath. "The council isn't happy with me. They believe I've dishonored our people by associating with you, and they think I've broken the laws by choosing to live differently. Zoroth said that there are others who won't let this go, that I could be punished for what I've done." Ethan looked down for a moment, processing her words. Then he met her gaze with a determined expression. "You're not alone in this, Celine. I'm here, and I'll always be here to protect you.
Act!
But we have to act fast.
Act!
If there are people who want to hurt you, we need to be ready." Celine shook her head, her thoughts racing. "I don't want to run, Ethan. I've spent my whole life doing what others told me to do. I don't want to hide anymore. I want to face whatever comes next." Ethan stepped closer, his hand gently touching her shoulder. "You don't have to face this alone. We'll figure this out together." Celine looked up at him, her heart swelling with emotion. She had never known this kind of loyalty, this kind of love. It was more than she had ever dreamed of. But even as she found comfort in Ethan's words, she knew the threat was real. The council's power was not to be underestimated, and if they were willing to punish her for following her heart, they would stop at nothing to keep her in line. The next few days were tense. Selena couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something that would change everything. She spent her time with Ethan, but she couldn't help but feel the weight of the approaching storm. One evening, as they sat together in the small human quarters Ethan had been given, they heard the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. There was a knock at the door. Ethan rose to answer it, his hand instinctively reaching for the weapon he kept nearby. Selena's heart raced, her mind racing with the possibilities. Was this the moment they had been preparing for? Was it finally happening? When Ethan opened the door, Celine gasped. Standing before them were two figures, guardians from her people, tall and imposing, their faces stern and unforgiving. "They weren't here for a friendly visit, Celine," one of the guardians said coldly. "You are to come with us." Her heart sank. The moment she had feared had arrived. The council had sent their enforcers, and her world was about to change forever. This part adds tension to the story, introducing a threat from Selena's people. She is faced with a choice between staying true to herself and facing the consequences of her actions. The scene is intense, with Celine realizing that her new life with Ethan is now at risk. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments. The air in the room grew thick with tension as the two guardians stood at the door. Selena's heart pounded in her chest. She had known this moment might come, but now that it was here, she felt unprepared. The guardians sent by the council had arrived to bring her back, and there was no escaping the gravity of the situation. Ethan stood protectively in front of Celine, his hand resting on the weapon holstered at his side. His body was tense, ready for anything, but his face remained calm. "What do you want with her?" he asked, his voice firm but controlled. The taller of the two guardians spoke first, his voice cold and impersonal. "Celine, you are to return with us. The council has ordered it. Your actions have caused unrest among your people. You will be held accountable." Selene's stomach dropped. "I don't belong to the council anymore," she said, her voice steady despite the fear rising inside her. "I don't belong to anyone but myself." The guardian's eyes narrowed. "You are mistaken. You still belong to your people. You will return with us, or we will be forced to bring you in by force." Celine felt the weight of his words settle over her, but she refused to let fear control her. She had spent too long living in fear of the council's rules. She wasn't going back. Not now. Not ever. "We're not going anywhere," Ethan said, stepping forward, his voice sharp. "If you want her, you'll have to go through me." The second guardian, a woman with silver hair and piercing eyes, gave a sharp laugh. "You really think you can stop us? You're just a human. You don't understand the power we hold, Ethan." didn't flinch. I don't need to understand. I know I'll fight for her. The Guardians exchanged a glance, and in that moment, Celine knew they had already made their decision. Without warning, the taller Guardian lunged toward Ethan, grabbing him by the shoulder and pushing him back with unnatural strength. Ethan stumbled but quickly regained his balance, pulling out his weapon and pointing it at the Guardian. "Stop," Celine commanded, her voice rising with authority. This isn't how it has to be, but the Guardians didn't listen. The tension snapped and the situation quickly escalated. The second Guardian lunged toward Ethan, but before she could reach him, Celine grabbed her arm with surprising strength. The Guardian froze, clearly taken aback. "Let him go," Celine said, her voice filled with quiet fury. "If you want to take me, you'll have to do it without hurting anyone." The Guardian yanked her arm out of Selena's grip, her eyes full of contempt. "You don't know what you're doing." Celine didn't care. She had made up her mind. She wasn't going back to the life the council had planned for her. She wasn't going to be anyone's prisoner. Not anymore. The decision was made. With a quick motion, she turned to Ethan, her eyes pleading. "We need to leave. Now." Ethan nodded, his jaw clenched. "Stay close to me." Guardians a second chance to react. Ethan grabbed Selena's hand and pulled her toward the back of the room, toward the small escape route he had noticed earlier. The Guardians were too slow to stop them as they moved through the back door. Selena's heart raced, but there was no turning back now. She couldn't let herself be dragged back to a life of control, to a life where her worth was measured only by what she could give to her people. They ran through the narrow alleyways behind the building, keeping to the shadows. Selena's mind raced, trying to figure out what their next move would be. They couldn't stay here. They needed to find a way to escape, to disappear, but as they turned a corner, they were met with another group of Guardians, more than they had anticipated. This was no longer just a simple confrontation, it was a full-scale hunt. "Celine," one of the Guardians called, his voice full of authority. "This is your last chance. Come with us willingly, and we won't have to hurt anyone." Ethan pulled Celine close, his eyes scanning the surroundings, looking for a way out. "We don't want any trouble," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But we will fight if we have to." The Guardians didn't respond, instead advancing toward them, their weapons drawn. Ethan's grip on Celine tightened, and for a moment, it seemed like escape was impossible. But then, as if by chance, a vehicle roared down the alley. The sound of its engine echoed in the narrow space, and without a moment's hesitation, Ethan grabbed Celine and pulled her toward the vehicle. The door opened, and the vehicle's driver, someone Celine didn't recognize, motioned for them to get inside. "Get in," the driver shouted. There was no time to question. Ethan pushed Celine inside and followed her, slamming the door behind him. The vehicle sped off, leaving the Guardians in the dust. For a few moments, there was nothing but the rush of wind and the sound of the engine. Celine's heart was still racing, but now there was a sense of relief. They were free, for now. But Celine couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't safe yet. She glanced at Ethan, who looked just as tense as she felt. "Who are they?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Who helped us?" Ethan's face tightened, but he didn't answer right away. "I don't know, but we can't trust anyone right now. We need to figure out where to go, and fast." Celine nodded. Her mind was still reeling, but one thing was clear. They had escaped, but the danger was far from over. She could no longer hide from the truth. She was a fugitive now, running from the very people she had once called home. The path ahead would be uncertain, but with Ethan by her side, she felt stronger than she ever had before. But as they sped through the streets, Celine couldn't shake the feeling that someone close to them had betrayed them. The person who had helped them escape wasn't just a stranger. They were part of something bigger. Someone who had their own agenda. Someone who wasn't entirely trustworthy. The story was far from over. The road ahead would be full of challenges, but Celine was determined to face them. She was free, and she wasn't going to let anyone take that away. The vehicle sped through the night, its headlights cutting through the dark streets. Celine sat beside Ethan, her thoughts racing. Every turn they took, every time they stopped, She could feel the weight of the Guardians' pursuit hanging over them. She glanced out the window, but all she saw was the blur of the city flashing by. They were on the run. There was no turning back now. Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel as he navigated the streets with practiced ease. He wasn't just trying to lose the Guardians, he was trying to get them out of the city. He glanced over at Celine, his eyes filled with determination. "We need to head for the border," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the urgency of the situation. "Once we're out of the city, it'll be harder for them to track us. We'll be safe." Celine nodded, though she wasn't sure what safe meant anymore. She had never been a fugitive before. Back home, she had always known her place. She had always been someone's daughter, someone's future. But now, she was someone who was hunted, someone who had defied everything her people had ever taught. Her Ethan turned the vehicle sharply, heading toward a less crowded part of the city. The streets here were darker, the buildings older and worn. It wasn't the most ideal escape route, but it was less likely to attract attention. "Do you think we'll make it?" Celine asked, her voice quiet. Ethan's eyes remained focused on the road, but there was a brief pause before he answered. "We'll make it," he said firmly. "I won't let anything happen to you." Celine felt a flicker of warmth in her chest. Ethan's words were a promise, one that she believed more than anything. But despite the comfort his words gave her, fear still gnawed at her. The Guardians weren't just going to let them go. And what would happen when they reached the border? Where would they go then? She had no answers. The drive felt endless, and every passing minute felt like an eternity. The tension in the vehicle was suffocating. Celine sat in silence, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She thought about everything that had happened, everything she'd left behind, her people, her culture, her entire way of life. She had turned her back on all of it, but in her heart, she knew it was the right decision. She couldn't go back to that life. She couldn't go back to being a prisoner of their expectations. She had chosen freedom no matter the cost. "Almost there," Ethan said, pulling her from her thoughts. His voice was tight, his focus on the road unwavering. "We just have to make it through this last stretch." Celine nodded, but a growing sense of unease settled over her. She could feel it, the sense that something was wrong. It wasn't just the danger of being hunted. It was something more. As they neared the edge of the city, Ethan slowed the vehicle, his eyes scanning the streets ahead. They had almost reached the border checkpoint when suddenly another vehicle appeared in their path, blocking the road. It was a sleek black car, the kind used by the higher-ups in Celine's society. Ethan slammed on the brakes, narrowly avoiding a collision. His hand shot out, grabbing Selena's arm as the vehicle came to a stop. Stay down," he said urgently. Ducked instinctively, her heart hammering in her chest. They were trapped. The Guardians had caught up with them. The black car's doors opened, and two more figures emerged. The tall, imposing figure of Zorith stepped forward, his eyes scanning the vehicle. "I told you, Selene," Zorith called out, his voice cold and filled with authority. "There's no escaping this. You've made your choice, but you will return to us. Now." Ethan's hand tightened around the steering wheel, his jaw clenched. "I'm not going to let you take her." Zorith's gaze flicked toward Ethan, a faint smirk on his lips. "You think you can stop us? You're just a human. You don't belong here." Celine's heart raced as she looked at the situation unfolding before her. Zorith wasn't just an enemy. He was someone who had once mentored her, who had helped shape her understanding of what was expected of her. And now, he stood before her, ready to take her back, to strip away the freedom she had just begun to taste. But Celine was no longer the girl she had once been. She wasn't going to let anyone control her life, not even Zorith. "I'm not going back," Celine said, her voice firm and filled with conviction. She looked directly at Zorith, her heart pounding in her chest. "I've made my choice. Will not live by your rules anymore." Zorith's eyes narrowed, and for a moment there was silence. Then, with a swift motion, he signaled to the other Guardians. They moved forward, weapons raised. Ethan's grip on the wheel tightened, but he didn't back down. "If you want her, you'll have to go through me." Zorith's gaze flickered to the other Guardian, who nodded. The two of them advanced. But before they could reach the vehicle, Celine did something unexpected. She grabbed the small weapon Ethan had left in the compartment between them. It was small, but it was enough. She stepped out of the vehicle, standing between Ethan and the Guardians, her body trembling, but her resolve stronger than ever. "Stay back," she said, her voice filled with a surprising strength. "I won't." "Let you take me, Zorath?" Stopped, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You would fight us?" "I'll fight for my freedom," Celine replied, her hands steady as she aimed the weapon at the ground in front of him. "I don't care who you are. I'm not going back." For a moment, everything was still. The Guardians didn't move, as if unsure how to react to this sudden defiance. Zorath stared at Celine, his eyes searching for any sign of weakness. Then, without warning, a voice called out from behind them. "Enough." A figure stepped forward from the shadows, someone Celine didn't recognize. But the tone of the voice was unmistakable. It was someone powerful, someone who wasn't afraid of the Guardians. Zorath turned, his expression darkening as the new figure approached. The game had changed, and Celine had no idea who this person was, but she could feel that things were about to get much more complicated. The figure who had stepped forward from the shadows was tall, with a commanding presence that made the Guardians hesitate. Selena's heart raced, and she instinctively tightened her grip on the small weapon in her hand. She didn't know who this person was, but they had made their presence known with authority. The newcomer's gaze swept over the Guardians, and without a word, they turned to Celine. It was a woman, dressed in simple but practical clothes, her face partially covered by a hood. There was something in her eyes, something Celine couldn't quite place. But it felt like she was seeing the world in a way that was different from everyone else. Zorath was the first to speak, his voice cold with disbelief. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice laced with authority. "This is none of your business." The woman didn't respond to Zorath's challenge. Instead, she took a step forward, her eyes still locked on Celine. There was a softness in them, a recognition that made Celine feel as though the stranger understood her. "Even without saying a word, Celine," the woman said, her voice calm yet filled with quiet power, "you don't need to go back to them. You don't need to live by their rules any longer." The words hit Celine like a wave, crashing over her with the force of something long buried. She had spent her whole life in fear of the Council's rules, in fear of what they would do to her if she didn't obey. But now, standing before this woman, she felt the truth in her words. She was free to choose her own path. Ethan, who had been standing silently behind her, moved closer to Celine, his hand resting on her shoulder. "Who are you?" His voice guarded. "Why are you helping us?" The woman finally turned her gaze to Ethan, her eyes piercing yet kind. "I'm someone who understands what it's like to be trapped by a society that doesn't care for you," she said, her voice steady. "I've seen it before, and I've learned the hard way that there's always a way out. You just have to be willing to fight for it." Zorath's eyes narrowed, and he stepped forward, clearly not liking the direction the conversation was taking. "Enough of this," he said, his tone rising. "Celine, you are coming back with us. There's no other choice." But the woman's response was swift. "You don't get to decide that anymore," she said firmly. "She's made her choice, and I'm here to make sure she's not alone in it." There was a tense silence as the two groups stared at one another. The Guardians, trained to fight and command, were taken aback by the woman's confidence. Zorath looked as though he was considering his next move, his gaze flicking between Celine and the woman. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, until Zorath finally spoke. "You think you can stop us? We have the power to take her back, to do whatever we want." The woman didn't flinch. "You're wrong. You've underestimated her, and you've underestimated me. We don't need to fight. We just need to walk away." For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly, one of the other Guardians lowered his weapon. The others followed suit, their faces etched with uncertainty. It was as if the woman's presence had made them question their mission, made them realize that there was something bigger at stake than their orders. Zorath's jaw tightened, his anger barely contained. "This isn't over, Celine," he growled. "You may have escaped for now, but there will be consequences. Council won't forget this." Celine met his gaze without flinching. "I don't care anymore," she said, her voice strong. "I'm not going back. I'm not going." to live by your rules." With that, Zorith and the Guardians turned and retreated, their footsteps echoing in the quiet night. It was clear they weren't giving up, but for the moment, they had been defeated. Celine stood still for a moment, the weight of the confrontation sinking in. She had made her stand. She had chosen her freedom, and for the first time in her life, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. The battle wasn't over, but this was the first step toward the life she had always wanted, one where she was in control. The woman, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation, now turned to face Celine. "You've done well," she said softly. "I know it's not easy, but you've made the right choice." Celine nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Ah, thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to do next, but ... I know I can't go back." The woman smiled, a gentle and reassuring smile. "You don't have to figure everything out right now. Take it one step at a time. There's a whole world out there for you to discover. You won't be alone. We're going to help you." Ethan, who had been watching silently, stepped forward, his expression softening. "Who are you?" he asked again, this time with more curiosity than suspicion. "My name is Lyra," the woman said. "I've been helping people like you, people who are ready to break free from the chains of their past. And I think you're ready for that." Too, Celine looked at Ethan, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of hope. There was still so much uncertainty ahead, but now she wasn't alone. She had made her choice, and she had someone by her side who believed in her. The road ahead might be difficult, but for the first time, Celine felt ready to face it. "We're with you," Ethan said, his voice warm and reassuring. Celine smiled, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "Then let's move forward," she said, her voice filled with new strength. Together, Lyra nodded in approval. "That's the spirit. Together, you can accomplish anything." And so, with the Guardians retreating into the night and a new ally by their side, Celine and Ethan stepped into the unknown. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Celine had found her path, and she was no longer a prisoner to her past. She was free, and for the first time, she was ready to embrace her future. This part brings the story to a turning point, with Celine making a strong stand for her freedom and meeting someone who will help guide her through the challenges ahead. Let me know if you'd like any changes.